YouTube page. So first I just wondered how many people are aware of this month-long celebration of Asian Americans and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. Has anybody actually known this to occur? Good, good. Um, having been on Hawaiian Islands for so long, I particularly like to pay attention to what's happening on the islands. But just, there are some interesting YouTube videos. Sometimes to me, it was just interesting to find out what all includes Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders. And Native Hawaiian, Samoan, Guam, Fiji, Tonga, the Marshallese people all encompass the peoples within the United States. And there's Melanesia and Micronesia and Polynesia. And there's this website, let's see if I can get to it and then just show it to you, that I thought had a fascinating, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see how we do. It just has a map that gives us an idea of Central Asia, East Asia, so, Asian Americans, Central Asia, East Asia, many countries that you might not think of as Asia, all these Hawaiian and Pacific Islands, Southeast Asia, Burma, Cambodia, Filipino, Hmong, Indonesia, Laotian, Malaysian, South Asia, Bangladesh, Bhutanese, Nepali, Sri Lankan. West Asia is typically referred to as the Middle East. So there's a chart here. Identities overlap and occur simultaneously, not discretely or serially. Within Asian and Pacific Islander communities, identities surface many aspects, including ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, languages spoken, religion, geographic location, socioeconomic status, family history, political history. So, this is rather conceptual, but it's really sort of eye-opening when we see, the census defines Asian Americans as those with origins in the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders as within the U.S. jurisdictions, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia. There are over 19.4 million Asian Americans in the U.S., and it is the fastest growing ethnic group. Chinese is the largest Asian ethnic group, while Indian is the fastest growing. API community-based organizations report serving survivors from 56 distinct API ethnic groups. So you can probably see that scale over there of populations. 3/4 speak a language other than English at home. 1/3 of Asian Americans are limited English proficient. So just this sort of acknowledgement. Let me see if I can find this one YouTube video that I liked. See if I saved it up here and if you'll be able to see it without me changing screens. Oh, I think I'll have to make a new share. But before I do, I'm going to stop the share so that I can find it myself. I believe it's, yep, here we go. Uh-oh, it's starting without us. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. There we go. Oh, where is it on my screen? going to stop. I'm going to start again, and I'm going to find it. Okay, here it is. Why do we celebrate Asian Pacific American Heritage Month?
Asian American itself is such a recent invention as a label, as a category of identity. It's only about 60 some years old, and it's always been in flux, even from the very beginning. So, who counts as Asian Pacific American? That has evolved over time. To understand the origins of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as it's called now, we really have to backtrack all the way to the 1970s. The 1970s is this really exciting moment when Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, for the very first time, play an active role in shaping policy. The two key factors for understanding how the Asian American 1970s came about was really the Black Freedom Movement. That is the dedicated insistence of Black Americans for racial justice that really had this incredible momentum through the middle of the 20th century. The second factor is actually what's called the Asian American Movement. This was a grassroots nationwide political mobilization of people of different communities and backgrounds. At the time, mostly Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, and Filipino Americans. The Asian American movement had two big inspirations. One was Black Power, and the other one was the anti-war movement. That is the kind of groundswell of opposition to the United States military intervention in Southeast Asia. A lot of young people are really at the forefront of that. Students, for instance, at San Francisco State striked in 1967, 1968. They pushed their administration to establish the nation's first school of ethnic studies. Because of the Black Freedom Movement, the Civil Rights Movement, affirmative action, there's a small but growing number of Asian American and Pacific Islander employees of the federal government. One of those goals, in fact, was to push the federal government to establish an Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. So at that time, it was a week, and I think in a lot of ways, the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community set that template in 1968. That's when the U.S. saw its first Hispanic Heritage Week. There are two women in particular that come to lead this charge. Their names were Jeannie Ju and Ruby Moy. Congress eventually passed a joint resolution to recommend that early May be designated as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. Frank Horton, that Ruby Moy worked with, was one of the principal co-sponsors, as were Asian American members of Congress, Senator Daniel Inouye, Senator Spark Matsunaga, Representative Norman Mineta. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter issues a proclamation declaring the nation's first Asian Pacific American Week to be in May 1979. May was chosen because it marked the anniversaries of two important events. The first was the very first time a Japanese immigrant arrived and set foot in the United States as far back as 1843. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in the month of May, and Chinese workers built most of the western portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. By the early 1990s, the first president, George Bush, expanded a week into a month.
In the support of Jeannie Ju and Ruby Moy, we established Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. And now I'm proud to take one more step and proclaim this May to be the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. But
that really suggests the growing political influence and power of Asian American and Pacific Islander groups. We can have the fun parties and cultural displays, like thinking about how we can best make use of this Heritage Month that so many community organizers work so hard for. in the 1970s to bring that opportunity to us.
Okay, that was that one. Just a little education on it all. And there have also been a lot of events, in each of our areas. Like in Oregon, there was AAPI Heritage Month. The Oregon Food Bank did some celebrating, and even the local library had something just last week. So all through the month, there are still some celebrations going on. The PBS. Oh wait, let me do this one real quick first, which is fascinating to know that the National Park Service. Let's see where it is. There it is. National Park Service, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And they have a whole acknowledgement of it, and they talk about heritage all year, and they have on that website for the parks, they have all of these short articles and places that they represent, and this is just a quick little video on their site. National Park Service. So they have stories, surfers in Hawaii, voices in science, park rangers. So I encourage you to snoop around a little bit, just to acknowledge the month and have awareness of something that might not otherwise be on your mind. Let me see if this will open for me. Hoping it will. I think, yes, it will. I'm going to make it bigger, and then I'll be able to share it. Let's see if it's going to go. I think it's going to go. Yep, it will. So PBS has all kinds of different short videos, and this, because it's about Hawaii, of course, is one of my favorites. And there's another one about Duke. I don't know if anybody knows Duke, who was the ambassador of Aloha, who was a surfer, a well-known surfer. So if you ever go to Oahu, you'll see statues of Duke standing beside his big, long surfboard. But this one is called Standing Above the Clouds, and it's about a mother and daughter activists that are part of the protection of Mauna Kea from the building of the world's largest telescope. So we can watch it for a little bit. Let's see, bigger. How do I make it bigger? There it is. Oh. Guess I'll figure out how to skip this. Where do I skip this? Maybe I don't get to.
We could just live happily ever after, but that would be no fun at all.
No, I don't think I get to skip it because it's part of PBS.
Mauna Kea is the highest mountain in the world from the seafloor, so the summit stands above the clouds. Its base is anchored deep in the ocean, so when we stand there, we know that we are touching all things on the earth, and we know that that is sacred. So if you have a place like that, that is your Mauna Kea. And then I say, what would you do for that place if it were threatened?
That kukui tree is my
I
namesake.
am one of many of Mauna Kea Ohana. That means family to Mauna Kea. And I'm also a petitioner in both contested case hearings that were held on this island for the protection and the love of the Mauna, to stop the development of a 30-meter telescope, an 18-story telescope on the northern plateau of our sacred mountain.
The Mauna's a portal, and it's like the closest we can get to our Ahua and our Creator. When we dance hula, we dance about the Mauna, and our prayers and our chants and it just goes right up to them through that portal.
Mauna Kea is our watershed, literally holds the water for this island, protects us from every single storm that comes our way. All of our aquifers on this side of the island is fed by this mountain. The Mauna calls in the rain and the snow, and that pure water form trickles down into all of our waterways. How could we not stand for this?
I remember feeling that sadness when I first had gone up there, because I wasn't even aware that there was that many telescopes. And then when you're finally up there and you see for yourself and you can count them, and it's more than two hands, it's painful.
There's already 13 up on the summit. But this time, it was going to be the one too many, the one too big.
The TNT will be a much larger and more extensive facility than any observatory that's come before it. The telescope calls for a structure that's 18 stories high, twice the size of any other building allowed on the island. All that on top of a structure built to support the dome that is larger than a football field.
We went up, and this is our first stand, and especially with this generation, this is our first time. And so we had to really call upon the chants that they've taught us.
This is not your place. And this is our people, our Genesis Moku. This is where we come from. I know you guys would protect your land with everything that you have. So respect us.
That was my life from then. October 7th happened, and even though I kind of understood what it was they were standing for, and I knew that it was not okay, once my feet touched the Mauna on that day,
They thought they were building a telescope. Instead, they awoke a nation.
These are some pictures that I used in my testimony. This is Kali. She was 9, 2013, and she wrote on the bottom, and I read them in my testimony.
I love Mauna Kea like I love my mama. My position in the case is emotional trauma to our people that are suffering and are going through this emotional stress. After the first arrest, there was like weeks, I would say months, that I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to be around people. I was just kind of like on edge. And then finally I started coming around again, and then it happened again.
58 arrests on Mauna Kea in 2015. 7 of those arrests were Native Hawaiian women in the prayer circle. Mother and daughter, side by side, arrested for being in ceremony. I am a Native Hawaiian, a mother, a breakfast waitress. I have no legal background and no experience in the legal system. And I am standing here amongst some of the highest paid lawyers in all of Hawaii. Why am I here? Why do I need to be here to convince you to do your job?
Just standing with your family members, your daughters, your mothers, there's always an element of fear. You know them at home. You know what makes them cry, what makes them angry. You know how fragile they are, as well as how strong they are. And then you're on the front line with them. As you are heading up a mountain with your children, without being even voiced, you are thinking, how am I going to stand? And at the same time, how am I going to protect my very continuance of myself, which for us are our daughters, who we cherish beyond all things, and trust that we're going to be okay at the end of the day. What we were doing is something that will be taught in, their history books one day. And for our children to be a part of it, it's something that we should all be proud of.
This work is not easy. It is hard, and it is heart-wrenching sometimes. And sometimes I don't want to do it anymore because of the amount of emotion and just some of the things that we see in this time. It is so overwhelming. We cannot be doing that to our grandparents and my brothers and sisters. We're not the criminals.
I think about my daughter who's 16 and my unborn daughter right now that are feeling this. It's such an incredible feeling to know that they're a part of it. We got to start training our Wahine warriors from the womb.
What's in there?
moments in Nevada, like our closest moments we've had in like a while, because I don't see her a lot during the day, because she's doing fashion things, because she's so cake. But yeah, like our little sanctuary in here, I feel like rest moment where we can just hide from all the things going on outside here.
So without playing this all the way to the end, it's just the acknowledgement, that Indigenous peoples everywhere fight a lot to try to hang on to their lands. I mean, this telescope, it ended up getting started, of course, that always seems to happen. But it took a lot of years, and it went through several court systems, and there was changes to management on it, and all kinds of continued demonstrations that occurred. Just like the pipeline that happened with the Native Americans. And Indigenous peoples are struggling all the time to protect what is being lost. And of course, the official TMT telescope builder said that they would do everything they could to preserve the community and the native Hawaiians. But I'm sure that these kinds of issues go on for a long time. But just the fact that PBS, has this whole series. Let's see if I can find the one with Duke. I bet I lost it. It's a whole series on the whole Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So if you like, looking at shorts and discovering some new things, let me show you the home page for it. A Tale of Three Chinatowns. There's concerts, there's Growing Up Asians. Used to have the Duke one right on the top, but I don't see it now. Oops, I'm loading a player by accident. How hula dancers connect with the past, and here's part of the thing of Rising Against Hate from when the spa murders occurred. So this is worth looking at to just absorb yourself a little in Asian American Pacific Islanders and Heritage Months. If you can just Google it and find the PBS and watch different shorts about it. There might be one more thing I wanted to share. Oh yeah, this. Well, maybe there's two, but this one's kind of neat. Where did I start with it? Hang on a minute. Well, I'll go to this page and we'll see if I can find the one I was looking for. But this is part of StoryCorps, I believe. Everybody know about StoryCorps? So this particular this is the blog right now on celebrating AANHPI voices. And oh, here's a cute little. So it has a bunch of different videos made by people who contributed to StoryCorps. So here's a cute short one. Is it showing? Oh, it's not showing, is it? Is it showing? It is? Oh, did I just lose it now? Now I lost it. Okay, let me see where it went. Okay, wait a minute. I've got to make it smaller. I have to find you again. Okay, I found you. I found it. Here we go again. Okay, good.
I wasn't very nice. If I make a mistake, my mother, she make me apologize. In our custom, when you apologize to your mother, you have to bring a cup of tea and say, I'm sorry. But I purposely dropped that hot cup of tea in my mother's lap. And I wasn't a good student. I always lie to get out of school because a lot of boyfriends after me. At that time I was still young. I was not bad looking then. So what else? Hurry, hurry. I'm gonna go home.
How'd you meet Grandpa?
I was a training nurse in a hospital. He was there for hemorrhoids operation. So when your grandpa see me, your grandpa keep on asking me to get married. And I said, I don't like you. You have bald headed. I didn't like him because he's ugly. But one thing about your grandpa, he's very smart. That's it. No more questions.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions.
Short one.
Short ones.
Tell me about working at Bloomingdale's. What did you do?
You know what I do. I'm not going to tell
No,
you.
you have to talk about it.
I am a detective. I got a very famous designer. I better not mention her name. She stole a dress, $3,000 some dollars. So I walked out the store. I said, would you like to pay me that dress? She said, do you know who I am? I said, yeah, you're a thief. So that's my life.
Do you have any regrets?
No, why should I regret? No, I think I'm old enough to do whatever I would like. And that's it.
You know, there's a line between independent and stubborn, and my mom crossed that a lot.
She liked to complain about things, but she didn't really mind. Like, she took care of Grandpa, and she did a lot of that on her own. You knew because she complained about it, but she would do it, even though she complained.
Yeah. I don't know how willing she would have been to do StoryCorps if she actually didn't know she had so little time left. It was kind of like one of her last gifts to us. My mother was cremated, and the original plan was to put her in the same cremorial
Next
as my
to Grandpa.
father. But she said, you know, keep me at your place for a while. So right now I have the ashes at home, and I talk to my mom every now and then. I'll tell her good night or I miss you or something like that. So I'm kind of happy she's with me.
Very sweet. StoryCorps. My niece and nephew tried to convince my sister and I to talk to my mother. She wanted us to all do a StoryCorps. It never really happened. We couldn't bring it together because you had to, it might be different now, but you have to write to StoryCorps and have them, you have to use their way of recording. You have to have certain microphones, and it has to be, you know, muffled in such a way that the sound is good and all of that. So I don't think any of us thought we could figure out really how to do it. So that's all I wanted to say about this whole Asian American and Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. I wonder if any of you have any comments that you want to make about it, or if you've noticed or observed it anywhere out and about around you. Or last week on Saturday, I think it was at the Multnomah County Library. There was It was only like an hour and a half, but they had several different representations of different cultures doing dances. And I had it on my calendar to go, but something else happened and I wasn't able to. So I was kind of disappointed I didn't go. Anybody have anything they want to say about this before I change gears a little bit? Al.
Yeah, Kendall, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you weaving this into the context of Buddhist teachings, you know. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Cynthia.
Yeah, I just had a question about the thank you for sharing that video about the um protest in Hawaii. What's the name of the mountain again?
Mauna Kea.
Mauna Kea. Anyway, I was just curious, was that it all seemed to be women? Was that just because that's who they were profiling, or was it really that it was the women
It was the
that
women
were?
and their daughters. I
Uh-huh.
mean, there were other protests at different times, but that particular one that they were profiling was women and daughters because they stood together, similar to the women in the demonstrations, here in Portland when there was focusing on women together. So there were other demonstrations that lasted for a long time throughout
Oh, okay.
several years, but they focused on that one that was mother-daughter. They
Is
called it
it
that was called the 30-meter telescope. I mean, the whole thing is called the 30-meter telescope. And Mauna Kea is also the active volcano, a different side of it. That's the active volcano, I don't know, last year and even this year. Every now and then I tune into YouTube and I watch new flows being made from the other side, a different side that flows right down into the ocean.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's quite a mountain, Mauna Kea.
Is the native Hawaiian culture particularly um, matriarchal? I mean, does it have a strong matrilineal side to
Um,
it, or?
that's interesting because it's kind of classic that there's a strong warrior class.
Yeah.
There's the elite that are um, they're the kings. There are the koas. The koas are the protectors of the home. Yeah, but there's a whole hierarchical that when the uh, Tahitians first arrived there, they brought a system.
Mm.
Um, so it's hard to say really because they were pretty patriarchal in their establishing of sort of the caste system, so to speak. But the home and the well, hula has kumus, both male and female. So I would have to say probably not.
Mm.
It's not old enough.
A lot to learn.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Comments? Seems especially important to me because of our Buddhist practice, because of our whole lineage of Asian Americans that brought Buddhism here from all of those countries. So I just like to acknowledge these things. The the other thing, I mean, when I first started about thinking about what I wanted to talk about tonight, I just had this welling of respect for the Dharma. And so I found this uh, video of Jack Kornfield. So I can't play all of it because it's like one of his hour-long Dharma talks. But I thought maybe I would just play part of it for a while. We'll see if there's a place that we can find a natural close to it. And if you want to, go watch the rest of it, I can copy the link and I'll put it over here in the chat box. Here it will come right here. Okay, it's in the chat box. Are you interested in hearing it? Yeah? Okay. It's mindful respect. It's fairly new. It was only 9 months ago. That's always nice to have a Dharma talk from, some of these senior teachers that we've heard about forever and have it be only 9 months old. And so we'll see. Here we go. Bum, 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 bum. Boom, boom.
Tonight, the theme of the talk will be respect. The teachings of many of the texts begin with the phrase, "O nobly born, O you who are the sons and daughters of the awakened ones, remember who you really are. Treat yourself with respect, honor. As Martin Luther King said, if a man or a woman sweeps streets for a living, they should sweep like Michelangelo painted, like Shakespeare wrote his plays, like Beethoven composed his music." And one of the beautiful things in the forest monastery where I lived with Ajahn Chah is everything was done with that spirit of mindful respect. Folding the robes, how you cared for your monk's bowl, the bowing before you eat, when you meet your elders, before you chant, the sweeping of the path through the forest as the trees would lose their leaves, sweeping like Michelangelo painted. O nobly born, you who are listening, my friends, meditators, remember this sense of respect. Now what's true, and I can't bypass it, is the recent Supreme Court decisions, especially the decision about abortion and making it illegal or allowable to be illegal in so many states that will impact especially women who are poorer, people of color. And I think about how long it's been the march for women's empowerment. Women have had to fight to get the vote. They've had to fight to not be a slave, to not be raped by the person who enslaved them, or not be somebody who is just producing more babies for the man, not be the person who is under the thumb of their husband. They had to fight to get contraception. Women have had to fight just to get equal pay, and it still hasn't happened, and equal opportunity. And I think of Dolores Huerta, where she says, why is it the farm workers and the farm worker mothers feed the nation, but they can't get food stamps and food for their children? I am someone who really respects life, all phases of life from the very beginning. More than that, I respect that each woman and each person should be able to decide and live their life for themselves. So I want to tell a story to continue with this talk tonight on respect. It's an old story that goes back to the time of King Arthur, and it's a story of one of his great knights, Sir Gawain. So it turns out that Sir Gawain and some of his fellow knights were out on an expedition across the countryside, and so Sir Gawain took a path that led him into a deep and dark forest. And he continued to ride to see what was there, and gradually it got darker and darker, and night fell. And as night was falling, Sir Gawain found himself in a clearing where there was a beautiful, almost magical well. And being thirsty, he dismounted from his horse and drank the waters of this well and began to rest when all of a sudden at a distance, he heard the sound of horse hooves. And a horse came toward the well. Now it was nighttime and the moon was shining. And this gorgeous white horse appeared with a woman veiled in a scarf who took the scarf off and looked at him, and she was a fright. She was the woman who in India we call Kali, and in Russia she's called Baba Yaga. The Mayans have a word for her. She is the fierce, ancient feminine. One eye on him and the other kind of drooping out and looking another direction, wild looking. And she said, "Who gave you permission to drink from my sacred well?" He didn't know what to say. She said, "You got no permission. You came here and took what was mine. What will you give me, knight?" And being a knight and trying to be an honorable man, he said, "I will give you what you wish, madam. I'm sorry I have caused affront." And she paused for a while and said, "Well, knight, I've been alone a long time, and I need a husband. What I would like is to marry you." This took poor Sir Gawain aback a little bit. He was ready to do kind of whatever she wanted, but this seemed a little bit much. He took a deep breath and reflected and said, "Is there not anything I can do to offer you instead of this wish, this demand that I marry you?" And she said, "Yes." He said, "There's one other thing. If you can answer a question for me, then I will release you from this request." And he said, "Why, certainly. What is your question?" She looked down at him from the horse and said, "The question you must answer is, what is it that women want? You get one chance. Many chances." He began to think, he began to imagine. He said, "May I have a little time to reflect on this?" Being a meditator as he was. And she said, "Yes, I will give you a year. I will lead you out of the forest, and I expect you to return in 1 year with an answer to this question, or else we shall have a great wedding feast." So Gawain mounted his horse, he agreed. She led him under the moonlight out of the forest, and he hightailed it back to the castle and found King Arthur and some of the other knights and said, "Let me tell you what happened to me." They all heard this story and said, "Go to sleep. Sleep on it first. We'll find out what women want." And the next morning, the king and the knights went out across the countryside, and they deputized others, and they had these great leather-bound books, and they began to write down from one woman after another what it is that women want. They want children. They want love. They want land. They want money. They want music and joy. One possibility after another, and the books began filled with what women want. Sir Gawain relaxed a little. He said, "We must have the answer somewhere in here." He lived his life, but then a year started to come up, and he realized, "I have to go back. I swore as a knight that I would return, and on my honor, I will do so." So he took a stack of the bound books with all the answers, and he went back on his horse into the woods. And there in the dark forest, by the well, he waited. And sure enough, after it got dark and the moon rose, he heard the hoofs of the horse, and sure enough, the great white horse and the woman with the shawl unveiled herself to be one of the ugliest women he'd ever seen, one of the least desirable of women he'd seen. Because when you are Baba Yaga and when you are Kali and so forth, you can take any form. And she said, do you have an answer? Fine knight that you are. And he handed her the books, and she began to leaf through them. No, 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 no. And finally she put them down and said, this is not the answer. And he said, so what now? And she said, we will have a wedding. You will take me back to the palace, and we will have a wedding. And he said, all right. How soon? She said, tomorrow. He said, couldn't we have it at night, please? And he said, no, no, no. We have to do it honorably. I want banquet. I want all the knights to attend. I want people to know. Let us do it in the daytime, and the next days bring them all together. So he went back with her. They gathered a banquet, and everyone came to see Sir Gawain marrying this old hag, as she was called. She was called the Hag of Vera in the Irish mythology. Kali Baba Yaga. And once the wedding took place, and everybody was talking about it, but they all respectfully watched, then Sir Gawain and the lady he married retired to the bridal chamber. And she looked at him and said, well, it's time for us to do our wedding night lovemaking. And he was somewhat taken aback. And she said, you're a great knight. Are you frightened to kiss me? So he took all of his knightly powers and stood up and walked over to her and planted a kiss on her lips. And the moment he did, she turned into this beautiful princess, more beautiful than he could have imagined, and explained that she'd been under a spell, and he had now broken the spell in part. By his willingness to kiss her, he had broken part of the spell. He, of course, was thrilled. Okay, I've married someone, and look who it turns out to be. She said, but then, to finish the spell, here's the dilemma. If you would like me to be beautiful like this for you at nighttime, then I will be the hag in the daytime, for you have broken half the spell. On the other hand, if you would like to have me go around with all of your friends and all in the court in this beautiful way, I will do so, but then I must turn back into the hag at night. Which will you choose, Sir Gawain? And he sat quietly. He did a little mindfulness meditation, reflected some metta, compassion practice. And finally he looked at her and said, I cannot choose really, my dear. It is up to you. And the minute he said this, a great smile broke across her cheeks, her face, and she said, you have broken the spell. When you have offered to me the answer, it is up to you. You have granted me something that answers the question, what women want. And she gazed at him and said, what women want is their own sovereignty. Sovereignty means to be the lady, the lord, the person who's in charge of their own life, not under someone else's rule. To be the queen of their own life, the one who decides. And this is what women want, this freedom. Sovereignty is a loving respect to awaken that and respect for the Buddha nature, the secret beauty of every being. it's interesting when I look at the Buddhist texts that mirror this story. Often people would come to the Buddha with questions and issues and problems, and he would listen to them and then give teachings or advice, question them, get into dialogue, help them see in a new way. And very often at the end of those texts, when all was done, and half of the time someone had some great, amazing revelation or breakthrough or enlightenment, but not always. When the dialogue was finished, the phrase the Buddha used was, "Now it is time for you to do as you see fit." He didn't say, "Follow these teachings, do what I told you," none of that. They had their dialogue, there was something illuminated. Now it is time for you to do as you see fit. And you can feel the level of respect, of sovereignty, if you will, in this. Every being loves respect. I think of this story of a little 7-year-old boy who went out to a restaurant with his mother. It was dinner time. They got the menus. The waiter came and said, "What would you like?" She ordered, and then she said, "Let me order for him." He would like mashed potatoes, peas, and maybe a little bit of chicken. He looked at the waiter and said, "What I really want is a hot dog and fries." The waiter looked back at the mother, then looked at the little boy and said, "Would you like ketchup with your fries?" And then turned around and walked off. And the little boy turned to his mother and said, "He thinks I'm real." We all long for respect. Our employers and employees, adults, children, elders, our garden, the fields around us, the quail and owls and rabbits and bugs. I love this poem from Lloyd Reynolds, who was the greatest American calligrapher. He was the person who taught Steve Jobs before Steve started at Apple, taught Steve the elegance of language. A bug crawls over the paper. Leave him be. We need all the readers we can get. I remember when the Dalai Lama had come to Spirit Rock along with Mahagosananda, the Gandhi of Cambodia, and they were old friends. And they saw each other, and this great smiles crossed their face, and they approached each other, and each one began to bow, and the other bowed, and then the Dalai Lama bowed lower, and Gosananda bowed lower, until finally they were kind of horizontal, and their tops of their heads touched. There was so much loving respect between them. This is what mindfulness offers. When you sit and you name what comes, the sadness, the excitement, the fear, the longing, the sensations, the stories, and you meet them with loving awareness and a bow, and you become the loving awareness that can honor things as they come and as they go. I remember going with my teacher Ajahn Chah to visit a temple on the border of Cambodia. The forest monastery where I practiced, the forest monastery, was near the border of Laos and Cambodia. And it was a fairly long ride across the province and then through this dirt mountain road to get to near the Cambodian border. And as we went, the driver who had picked us up in a little Toyota or whatever it was, started to drive really fast. He was a young guy and he liked to show his stuff. But it was a 1.5 lane dirt road winding through the mountains, and you couldn't see around the curve. And he was speeding through it, and periodically, not very often, there would be a big bus or a logging truck would come by, and he would go fast, and we said, "Please slow down, please slow down." But he didn't listen. It was quite a trip, speeding around these blind curves, hoping there wasn't a bus or a logging truck. I got rather frightened about it. And then I looked over at Ajahn Chah and I saw that his knuckles were white. And somehow it reassured me somehow I wasn't alone in it. We finally made it to the courtyard of this Cambodian temple. And he turned to me and he said, "Scary ride, wasn't it?" It wasn't as if he was supposed to be, "I'll never be afraid," or some kind of idealization. Scary ride, wasn't it? It was as if he was bowing to it. People go to the amusement park and get a ticket for a scary ride. It's just the way it was. So mindful, loving awareness offers a bow of respect to what arises. Respect for the body. As the poet Eduardo Galeano wrote, the church says the body is a sin. Science says the body is a machine. The marketplace says the body is good for business. The body says, I am a fiesta. So with loving awareness, not obsessed and clinging to your body, and not avoiding it and ignoring it, but with the curiosity and interest of loving awareness, you can begin to pay respectful attentions to your body. Close your eyes just for a moment and ask, what in your body is wanting respect?
I think that's a perfect place to stop. What in our bodies is wanting respect? Letting mindfulness be that window of caring for ourselves, whatever it is that arises. So thank you for listening to my variety of interests tonight, from Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders to respect for mindfulness and respect for ourselves, our hearts, our minds, our bodies, the practice. And if you want to listen to the rest of that, you can go look it up. Let's see if anybody has anything they want to share. I'll just say one thing, although we'll see each other again before it happens, but on June 17th in person at Portland Insight Meditation Center, I'm going to do the second. I did it in the spring, and now it's going to be summer, and it's Phyllis Moses who is teaching movement and Tara dance, and we're going to do meditation, movement, and my bowls, my sound bowls. And we had a good turnout the last time. 23 people came, so I'm hoping it will happen good again this time. Hard to say since it's summertime, but I don't know what happened to whether it's still recording. Well, I guess it is, so I'm just going to pause it now and let the recording stop.